Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with the In or Out book tag. This tag was originally created by Rick McDonald, and I was tagged by Hannah from Hannah's Books. I will of course link both of their videos down below, and I'm really excited to do this one as somebody who has very strong bookish opinions, and who also, like Hannah said, often answers yes or no questions with, well, sometimes, or like, it depends. I'm just very excited to do this one. Now, some of these I think I can whip through pretty quickly, but I have explanations for some of them, of course. So the premise for this tag is you just go through all of these prompts and you have to say if, in your opinion, these bookish things are in or out. So, like, I guess if you enjoy them or if you don't. Number 1, reading the last page first. Out, usually. I only do this very, very rarely, and usually it's for books that I'm not enjoying so much, or like that I need to know that certain things turn out a certain way in order to keep going. I've mentioned this before, but one thing I will sometimes do, although not very much anymore, is if there's a character that I'm very worried about, I will sometimes flip to the end of the book and just scan for their name. And if I see their name, I'm like, okay, they probably survive, I can continue reading. But in general, no, I don't read the last page first, so out. Number 2, enemies to lovers. Definitely in. This is one of my favorite tropes, but it has to be done well, and it has to be slow burn. Like, if an enemies to lovers relationship is just really fast, it's not any good, in my opinion, and I maintain that poorly done enemies to lovers is why so many people think they don't like the trope. Like, I see a lot of people saying that they're tired of this trope and they think it's like overdone or whatever, but the examples they give are really bad examples of romances, so definitely in for me. 3, dream sequences. I'm gonna say out. I find them very frustrating. They feel kind of like flashback scenes to me. I don't know why they irritate me so much, but I really hate reading dream sequences. I don't know what it is. My only exception is if it's like a book where part of it actually takes place in dreams, like dream worlds, I actually really enjoy, but regular dream sequences I'm not a fan of. Number 4 is love triangles. I'm gonna say out most of the time, but I am finding more and more that I think are well done. Number 5 is cracked spines. Out. I don't like that. Number 6 is back to my small town. I'm gonna say in by default, although I generally like stories that take place in a small town, so not really like traveling back, but like I like that as the main setting. Although this applies to all genres. Like, I feel like the small town vibe is usually applied to like contemporary, but I like this in like historical fiction and fantasy, like any kind of that. I like sort of, like, I just don't like big cities as settings usually. Number 7, monsters are regular people. Now, my instinct to like interpret this one is like how the real monsters are humans, which I think as a trope that is definitely in. I think that's a really interesting thing to explore. But I also think the other interpretation of this trope is in for me, which would be like some people, like characters who appear to be monsters, but they're really not. Like, I just find any discussion of that interesting. So in on both counts. Number 8, no paragraph breaks. Out. It is very frustrating to read, and I think it's very pretentious, and I think it's usually a sign of an author who thinks they're better than they are. Number 9, multi-generational sagas. I'm gonna say out almost all the time. There have been a couple of exceptions, but in general, I just find one character so much more interesting, and I resent having to spend time with all these other characters. I think it's very hard to do multi-generational sagas in a way that I enjoy. 10, rereading. Definitely in. I love rereading. I think it's an important part of a reading diet. I know that not everybody is into it, but I think it's really important. I really love doing it. Like, it's not only something that is enjoyable and can be kind of comforting, but I think it's also so great to return to stories that you love, or maybe that you didn't love, and get new things out of them. I have sometimes found I change my opinion on a book. Maybe a book that I really didn't like at the time ends up becoming a new favorite. That has happened to me before. Maybe a book that I enjoyed can resonate more for me as an adult, which has also happened several times. So yes, definitely in. 11, artificial intelligence. In. I really like the exploration of this and like what makes a human and that kind of thing. I'm very particular with sci-fi, but I tend to like sci-fi that does explore that idea. Number 12, drop caps. I had to look up what a drop cap is. Apparently it's like the when one letter is much bigger than the rest of the text, and I think in. I definitely like how that looks in a book. 13, happy endings. This is apparently a really controversial opinion. In. I like things to turn out well, although I think there's an assumption that an ending that is, you know, happy or like satisfying in some way has to be everything's all tied up and nothing bad ever happens, because that's not true. The thing I care most about is that the ending of a story matches the tone of the story, matches the kind of feel and what the author is going for. So that I think is most important. But I also like, I think it's much harder to write a satisfying happy ending than a depressing ending, because like if an author writes a horribly depressing ending, people will be mad about it, but there is still always this underlying assumption that the author is more serious about their craft, or like they're a better writer or something, and I just think that is not true. Yeah, we'll come back to this idea with later questions, but yeah, happy endings in. I think it is very possible to do them in a way that is satisfying and that doesn't feel cheap and that feels fulfilling and that feels right for the story and that still has consequences for characters. I have very strong feelings about this. 14. Plot points that only converge at the end. I'm gonna say out most of the time. Well, this is another kind of in the middle one. There have been a few times I think it's done well, but I think this depends on me enjoying the plot points separately. Like if I am not really feeling a book and I don't see why these certain perspectives are in the book or whatever, and then at the end they come together, that can sometimes like bump up my opinion of a book, but it's rare that a book that is not working for me suddenly does work for me because of the ending. So that's another in the middle one. 15 is detailed magic systems. I like these, but I also really appreciate like more vague magic systems and kind of soft focus fantasy. So I guess I'll say out most of the time. Like I really appreciate a fantasy story that can have a more, they can have a looser magic system. Like I think that is like an unpopular, I feel like when people talk about loving magic systems or like fantasy magic ideas, usually the detailed ones get more attention, and I can definitely enjoy those, but I also think that the like soft focus magic is underappreciated. So I guess I'll say out, because even though I have really enjoyed a lot of both kinds, I think I am slightly more likely to enjoy a soft magic system than a very detailed one. 16, classic fantasy races. This is an in for me, but it's not like strong feelings. Like I'm not automatically turned off by a book if it has like classic fantasy races or people in it. I do like stories about elves, but I also, those like kind of overlap with like the fair folk and everything, which I like. I do think Hannah has a really good point though, and I have seen other people talk about this, the way that fantasy races as a concept, it kind of, like if people apply that logic to humans, for example, it has some really unfortunate implications. Like the fantasy races are not human, and so like if people kind of map those differences onto like human races with like differences in skin color, that's obviously like that's racism. So yeah, I think that the fantasy races thing is, I think nowadays you have to handle it much more intentionally, but this isn't like an automatic no for me. So I guess I'll say in, but it's a lukewarm in. Number 17, unreliable narrators. Definitely out. I hate this trope. This just, to me, it feels like lazy writing. Like if you're trying to surprise the reader, I don't think it's very impressive if you have to lie to them in order to surprise them. Like, of course, anybody can write a shocking plot twist if you just lie to the people reading your book. Yeah, I find the unreliable narrator an extremely frustrating trope. One thing I do like is when you make assumptions along with the narrator and then they realize they're wrong and you also realize you're wrong. That I actually really like when it's done well, but unreliable narrators as like the general, what people mean when they talk about that, out. I hate that trope. 18, evil protagonists, out. I find that as I'm getting older, I have less and less interest in like villains as, I guess like as characters. Like I find them a necessary evil so that the story can happen. But I'm not somebody who gets excited about villains usually. And I just, like I need to be, like I'm a character focused reader, so I have to be invested in the characters in order to care about the story. So I think definitely like you can have complex or kind of like in between like morality characters and I can enjoy those. And I mean, one of my favorite characters is ARTEMIS FOWL, who starts off a villain. So like it's definitely possible to do that well, but it has to be an arc for me. I don't want to follow a despicable person just doing horrible things for an entire book or series, because there's no, yeah, with a few rare exceptions. Like Glengarry Glen Ross is a very interesting play, which is basically full of terrible people, but because of the way that one was done, it was like nobody really deserved happiness. So you kind of ended up attaching yourself to the most competent one and the slightly less bad one. So it is possible to, I guess, sell me on this idea, but overall, out. 19 is The Chosen One. I'm gonna say out usually. I have enjoyed books that have the Chosen One trope, but it doesn't usually draw me to a story. It can actually kind of turn me off a story. And my favorite kinds of characters are the ones who are just like ordinary people. Like I really like when stories show that like ordinary people can have adventures and can have these like beautiful personalities and these amazing accomplishments and these fantastic like relationships and everything, which is kind of the opposite of The Chosen One. 20, when the protagonist dies. Out. This goes back to my feelings on happy endings, because like if you kill off your main character, people might be furious, but there's like this perception that, at least, okay, my impression from how I always see people respond to this is that there's this underlying assumption that the author is like inherently a better writer. Like the whole kill your darlings thing. I don't like that. Kind of similarly to the happy endings thing again, like I think this feels like a cop-out for me for several reasons. One, because often the consequences of the story just get brushed under the rug because the main character isn't around to experience them. And I also think that this is a shortcut for what feels like a meaningful ending when it often isn't. Yeah, I have some thoughts on how character deaths are used in general, and I keep planning to do a discussion video on it, but I think I'm going to be too angry, and I'm also a little nervous because BookTube loves to talk about how much they want their characters to die. Anyway, so yeah, to sum up, when the protagonist dies, for me that is out. I think it's another example of lazy writing. I think that it's used as a shortcut to be like a serious author when actually it can mean like avoiding the consequences of your story. And I also just don't think, like, it is possible to have a bittersweet ending or an ending where things are not perfect. And like you can do that with things other than killing off your main character. Because I find it very frustrating. So I feel very strongly about those reasons. And then on top of that, I find something very irritating and frustrating about having a book or series that you have invested money in, possibly, that you have invested time in, sometimes years of your life if it's a series, and then the author just kills off the thing that is important to you, or the character that is important to you. Like, it can feel a little bit like, well, what was the point? You know? So yeah, I have a very personal reason, and then I have some more objective reasons. 21, really long chapters. Out. If I'm enjoying a book, I don't mind a long book, but I don't want it to feel like the chapters are really dragging on. 22, French flaps. In. I think they look nice, and I'm also just a paperback lover, so. 23, deckled edges. Overall out, but I don't like hate them with a passion like I know some people do, but if given the choice, I would prefer not to have them. 24, signed copies by the author. I guess in, but it's a very like, again, this is a very lukewarm answer for me. In general, I don't really care about signed copies because I have never been to like an author signing in person, so it's not attached to a memory. Like, I don't really attach importance to a signed book just because it was signed. Like, I don't attach more importance to a signed book just because it was signed. The only exception is when I thought I was gonna love The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green, I did actually make sure to order one of the like first print, first printing, because those are signed copies, because I had heard that he'd actually written about the experience of signing them, and I thought it was going to be a book I love. I'm currently reading that one and I do love it, so I think that was a good choice. So if I actually went to a signing event, I think that would be more exciting, but I'm a soft in on this one because like most of the time it doesn't matter to me, but yeah, it could be nice in some cases. 25, dog earring pages. Out. I do not do that to my books. I do not like that. 26, chapter titles instead of numbers. I'm gonna say in. I don't dislike this. I enjoy creative or interesting chapter titles or ones that like connect to the story in some way. It would be nice to have like the titles and the numbers, but I don't mind if there aren't numbers, and I also don't mind if the chapters are just numbers. So I'm pretty like loosey-goosey with how you can like structure chapters. as long as there are chapters. I hate books that have no chapters. It's just really frustrating to read them. And also, this is another example for me of a sign that an author thinks very highly of their abilities when maybe that's not quite justified. Like, I feel like the no chapter breaks, or like no quotation marks, or like no paragraph breaks, I feel like those are very pretentious things that make a book hard to read, and it's like you're trying to cover up a mediocre story by making it like really modern and edgy, and it's like, well, there's still not, like, the writing is still not very good. There I go, answering a question that was not even on here, but so that was the in or out book tag. I had a lot of fun giving my bookish opinions, of course. So I think I might tag a few people in the description. I had a ton of fun doing this one, but if you would also just like to do this tag, I tag you. And please comment down below and let's see, let me know. You know what I want to know? Let me know if you actually enjoy happy endings, because apparently we need to form a support group because there's so few of us. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!